Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Student Pilot Cast, Episode 4, Grooving with 6.6 Hours. I'm your host, Bill Williams, so join me as we explore what it's like to learn to land and all the other stuff, too.
Chandler Ground, Cherokee 4121 Tango, Chandler, service taxi for south departure with Kilo.
To be an angel. Where does the sun go when it sleeps? Is every star that
Okay, now that I'm back from vacation and back into my lessons, I thought it was time to do another audio cast. I apologize for the long delay of a little more than, I guess, about 2 weeks or so, but I was on vacation with my wife in Seattle. While we were there, we almost took a ride in a de Havilland Beaver on floats, but we ran out of time, so while that would have been a good story to tell on this audio cast, I'm sorry to say we didn't get around to doing it. We did, however, get to 2 aviation venues while I was there in the U.S. mecca of commercial airline manufacturing, which is the Puget Sound area, of course. It's the home of Boeing. We first went up to Everett, to Paine Field, Snohomish County Airport, where Boeing manufactures all of their wide-body airplanes, including the new 787 Dreamliner, which is quite a machine, I gotta say. We perused the Future of Flight Museum and took a tour of the manufacturing plant there. Man, that's an impressive operation. We were able to see them building several behemoth 747s, and got to see the first of 3, I think it was, 787s, including the first experimental that'll fly. We also got to see a brand new 777 taking off from Paine Field on a test flight before delivery to Singapore Airlines, I think it was. It was pretty cool. Then a few days later, we went to Boeing Field just south of Seattle and experienced the Museum of Flight, which is always fun. We had a really nice time, but I was excited to get back and get on with my own training. I did bring my logbook in case that float plane pilot that we were going to go with was a CFI, and I could get a little duel in that type, but again, we ran out of time, so we weren't able to take the flight. It's a bummer. I'll put some pics from Seattle in the show notes, though, and if you want to see any of the planes. Unfortunately, you can't take pictures on the tour of the factory, but I did get some shots of that new 777 taking off. Anyway, we got back late last week, and I got 2 more flights in before the week was over. I'm now up to 6.6 hours, and I feel like I'm finally starting to get a hang of that whole landing thing, but a little more on that later. I've been getting a lot of cockpit audio since I've been back. I've changed the method I'm using to capture the audio, and it's much more foolproof than before, and it doesn't rely on a microphone or turning on a microphone or even having a good intercom in the plane, for that matter. The biggest problem is that it's not very interesting for the most part, which is unfortunate because it sounds great. That said, if you'd like me to include more cockpit audio in my cast, simply send me a note at bill@studentpilotcast.com or use the contact page at www.studentpilotcast.com and let me know. I'll include more in my next cast in any case, but it really is a lot of what you would expect. To tell the truth, I've been flying so much since getting back and have so much audio now that it's a little bit overwhelming. I will say this, though. Having a recording of my flight lessons is a huge asset, and even if you're not going to post it for all the world to hear, I would recommend all students record their lessons after doing it myself a few times, as it's really helping me go over the lessons again in my mind after I've flown. I generally start listening to a lesson on my way home from the airport, the lesson I just had. So not only can I fly the lesson, if you will, again in my head, which helps solidify concepts and keeps things in my memory. But I also catch things that my CFI said that I didn't even hear the first time around. After all, as we all know, an airplane cockpit isn't the best classroom, right? And I find that I miss some of what he says the first time around. Probably because I'm concentrating on something else at the time, like holding altitude or thinking about why my left bicep is so tired, and then realizing I should probably trim up the airplane a little bit. Anyway, for whatever reason, I miss some of my instruction while I'm in the cockpit, and having the recording really helps out. I mentioned to Brian a week or 2 ago that he should have all of his students record the flights as a study aid. he just kind of laughed briefly, like a courtesy laugh. So I guess either he thought I was only kidding, which I partially was, or he didn't agree. Either way, I'm convinced, and I'm passing along this great tip to all of you. As far as my lessons go, I'm feeling pretty good about some of the aspects of my training. I feel like my air work is so far, pretty good. I have a bit of a problem sometimes holding altitude when I'm doing a maneuver, but it usually doesn't vary more than 80 feet or so. I don't always mess it up, but sometimes I find myself concentrating too much on one thing and then let the altitude get away from me a bit. But for the most part, I'm understanding the concepts, I know the procedures, and I feel pretty good about the flying. I'm also fairly satisfied with where I'm at with emergency procedures, although I actually have a funny observation about learning this, and I guess it might be a good tip for anybody else doing this soon. I wrote down the procedures as my CFI laid them out for me, and then I memorized them. I taught myself the flow and memorized the steps, which sounds good, right? Well, I think I made a slight error in the way I did this. When I memorized them, I memorized the steps as you would teach someone how to do it. In other words, what my CFI said, do this, and then do this. So when my CFI pulls the power in the air, I recite the steps back in my head, but the steps aren't necessarily what I want. I want more action, right? I feel like what I should be doing is just doing and saying what I'd want to do and say in an emergency situation and memorize that, not the steps themselves, if that makes sense. So I guess an example here would be I'm thinking to myself, okay, I would do this, and then I would do this, and then I would say this, and I would get on the radio, and I'm going through these steps in my mind instead of just doing them. And I don't know if the distinction there makes sense, but that's what I'm trying to get across. So I'm going to try and change that, and I guess what that means is more couch flying, more visualization, and less step memorization. So back to where I think I am. Okay, I think I'm pretty good with the air work. I'm doing okay with the emergency procedures, and I'm doing okay with the communications, ATC, etc. Most of my gross mistakes on the radio are going away or gone, so that's good. I also feel like I'm flying the pattern pretty well, although the other day I did come into the downwind pretty hot, and I fell behind the airplane, and I ended up flying a pretty sloppy pattern. I got a little low on the downwind, and then a little fast, and then on final I was too high, and anyway, it was a mess. But for the most part, that part seems to be going pretty well. But, and there's always a big but in there somewhere, right? But I'm not really happy with where I'm at with my landings. I'm not relaxed. I'm not looking down the runway. I'm overcorrecting as I head over the threshold. It's like a switch goes off in my brain to suddenly tense up as soon as I'm about to touch down. I know what I've got to do. I know what I'm doing to sabotage myself, but I still have a hard time doing it, and I still have a hard time keeping myself from sabotaging myself. So I'd love to hear from other pilots out there. Is it typical to have such a mental block with this? I haven't bent anything yet except my ego, but I'm not getting it as fast as I had hoped or expected. My CFI keeps telling me that I'm doing just fine, but frankly, I don't believe him. What can I say? So I've got a few more things we've got to cover before I'm ready for my phase check, and in my mind, the major one being my overcoming my landing mental block, but hopefully in the next little bit I'll be ready, and you can bet I'll keep everyone posted. Again, I want to apologize for the big delay in getting this episode out, but vacation and work kept me first from being in the cockpit, and second, out of the audio editing bay for a while. I don't expect that I'll usually have such a long break in between episodes. As a matter of fact, I expect to release another one with a bit of cockpit audio and some more information about what's going on within the next few days. So stay tuned. So until then, please drop me a line and let me know what you'd like me to include in my upcoming audio casts. What are you curious about, and what type of information do you think I should include? And heck, if you're already a pilot, I'd love to talk to you about what it was like for you to learn to land, or any other challenges you had while you were training. Even better, if you're willing, I'd love to record our conversation about it and include it in an upcoming episode. So if you're interested in helping the listeners and me out with this, send me an email at bill@studentpilotcast.com and let me know. I think it'd be great to hear from others on this topic, and I'm sure the other listeners would love to hear it as well. But even if nobody wants to do that, it's okay too. After all, I'm still going to be a pilot.
No, I know I should by now. It isn't written in my stars. Shadows, dreams, and light and dark that sometimes seem just as far. No, I know so many things by now. I feel that never come to pass. Just childhood dreams of random things that they're always so fast. So what does it take to be an angel? Or does it matter much at all?
The music for today's audiocast is the song To Be an Angel from the great Canadian band Uncle Seth. You can get more information and subscribe to the Student Pilot audiocast using iTunes, Zune, or any other podcatcher at www.studentpilotcast.com.